My name is Yema Ferreira. I'm from Angola and I live here in Copenhagen. I'm a psychotherapist and I work mainly with black women, so black and African women, women of African descent. That's the area that I focus on, the group that I focus on most. But sometimes people who are non-black, perhaps are people of color, or men, find who think that my experience would benefit them, my perspective would benefit them. They also seek me out, and they're very welcome in my practice.
That's very good. But basically, what you do when you work with the people of color, like people in clinic, what exactly the activity that you do?
It's psychotherapy. So they come to therapy with me. Maybe people have, either they're suffering from some mental health difficulties, or they just want to come and have some thinking space about themselves and their identity. But I do a lot of trauma healing work, I do a lot of identity work, and then just the regular mental health stuff.
When you say that you work with people who've got a trauma, what kind of trauma that the people have that you work with?
It varies, but so most of it is. So I work with a lot of women. A lot of it is sexual trauma. It can be childhood sexual trauma. It can be sexual trauma in the adult years. Some of it may just be childhood trauma from abuse or neglect growing up. It can be a lot of it for people who have grown up in Denmark as well is racial trauma. So it varies, but it doesn't really matter what the cause of the trauma is. I mean, some experiences have specific. There are specific things that go with specific experiences, but trauma is in essence the same. It's the memories that get trapped in your body, even if they're not in your awareness, and they kind of get in the way in the present, right? So this thing happened in the past, but it's still stuck in your body and it gets in the way in the present moment. So it's about, first of all, sometimes gaining the awareness that that's happening, right? That the reason why you're doing this is because of that thing that happened there. And this is what happens to your body, this is what happens to your nervous system when you, and getting some tools when it's relevant to deal with the things in the moment. For example, if you get an anxiety attack, there are things that you can do to sort of be with it and not be carried away by the anxiety. But also, a big part of therapy in general, but specifically in regards to trauma, is telling your story. Having the opportunity to tell your story, to tell your own narrative of that, not what somebody else said or how somebody else sees it, but your own version of. Because a lot of times, when people have an experience, we think that maybe this is what hurt most, or this is what, but for them it might be something completely different that we can't see. So having the opportunity for the client to tell their own story and to tell it in an environment where that's not going to be challenged, it's going to be respected. But and for the therapist to bear witness to that, to the client's story. A lot of my work is bearing witness, because a lot of times we go through things and we're not even sure, because we feel like maybe it's in our head now. It's been such a long story that's been going in our head over and over that. So to have someone bear witness to your story kind of validates it. It's a little bit like, the whole, if a tree falls in the forest and no one is there to see it, did the tree fall kind of thing. That someone bears witness to your story makes your story real in a sense.
Right. You said that you work with the women. Why only women, not
Why I focus on women?
Yes.
That's a very good question. So I focus on women. For most of my professional life, I've worked with women. I feel very drawn to this group. I think for me it has something to do with, okay, I think there are different levels, right? So I see my mission as helping to heal the collective trauma of people of African descent in the world, right? But I'm one person, right? So I can only do so much. And part of it is where can I maximize, where do I offer the most, right? What group, I mean, even saying that I'm working with Black people, because I could work with anybody, right? But even to choose to work with Black people, it's a way of sort of narrowing it down. Okay, if I'm gonna help humanity, right, this is the little drop that I can do. So I'm gonna go to Black people, I'm gonna go to women, because I think part of it is because I'm a womanist. I'm a woman. I'm a womanist. I think that there is an excess of masculine energy in the world, and it's also distorted. It's not authentic, sort of spiritual masculine energy. It's a distorted version, and that's why we are where we are, because it's just about taking, destroying, doing. And I think that a lot of the feminine energy has been suppressed. So the reason I focus on women on that level is to bring more of that feminine energy, because they have to balance each other, right? If it's just feminine energy, we're not going to go anywhere. We're all going to be creative, we're all going to be healing, we're all going to be all these beautiful things, but we're not necessarily going to move forward. If it's just masculine energy, it's just about boom, 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 and there is no feminine wisdom to tell the men, and I'm talking about feminine and masculine energy in both men and women, right? But there's no feminine energy to tell the masculine energy, okay, now it's time to kind of slow down and do something else. So it's important for the two energies to balance each other. So that's why I work with women, to bring more of that. That's part of why I work with women. Bring more of that feminine energy, to bring more balance.
You said that you're working for people who got a mental problem or trauma. Do people aware, do they have got this kind of problems?
For most people, yeah. By the time, that's the reason they come to me, right? Either they're aware, or somebody around them says, it might help to, because a lot of times people are aware, but they don't think there's anything that can be done about it. They feel alone with the problem, and they don't necessarily know what to do, where to seek help. And then somebody around them will say, oh, maybe you could do this, or maybe you could do that. And looking for a therapist is one of the things that people suggest.
But do you know why people, especially Blacks, have got a problem on seeking help?
I think it's both very historical and very present. I think a lot of the Black experience for the last 5-6 centuries has been about surviving, right? So we got into this survival mode, and seeking help for mental health issues almost feels like a luxury, right? So a lot of people feel, I can get up, I can go to work, I have food on my table, I have a roof over my head. I thank God for that, and that's kind of all I can get. So part of it is, I think, generational trauma, and resigning ourselves to a survival state of being. I think that's one. Another one is that we have historically been mistreated by the mental health profession. Runaway slaves were diagnosed with whatever the disorder was that they decided, that people had, that made them run away. Women, up until very recently, up until the beginning of the 20th century, were sent to mental hospitals when they, owned their sexuality, had children out of wedlock, or did anything really that society didn't deem acceptable. Still today, and coming back specifically to Denmark, but not only, when we go, because racism is embedded in society, it's also embedded in the profession. So when we go to look for a therapist or a psychologist or a psychiatrist, most of the time it's going to be a white middle class person whom we might not necessarily relate to. And they are not really educated in other cultures. And by other cultures, I don't even mean other countries, even just, working class people, or people who are non-white, people who in some way are outside of that experience. A lot of these professionals are not trained to understand the differences, and even the theories, they came out of that class, right? The psychological theories were formulated by white middle class men mostly, even though professionally it's mostly women. So even there's already a division and some level of discrimination. So often when we go to see a therapist, we will experience the same things. So the reason why people tell me, who come to me, for example, and say that they were specifically looking for a black therapist, the reasons are, I had a white therapist. By the time I was done just explaining who I am and me and why I am, I was so tired that I asked myself, why am I paying this person to come and educate them about me? That's one thing. So it's not just, you come in and you get to the work, right? There's all this work of explaining, because there's a lot of things that the therapist won't understand. Another thing is, when people bring experiences of racism, a lot of times the therapist is defensive, so I'm not saying that it's every time, but this is what people report. This is my own experience, which is part of why, going back to the question of why, the question was why women, not why black people. But if you had asked,
no, it's coming. The question,
yes.
actually always was the
Well,
question
was that
to
coming?
ask you about,
Because I'll answer now,
yeah.
because it's coming now. So one of the reasons is that I felt in my own experience, I in therapy, in coaching, with white professionals, I felt that there was always a part of me that wasn't addressed. There was always a part of me that I brought that they didn't quite know what to do with, and it was very unsatisfying. I went home and I had to figure it out myself. So
Yeah.
these are the reasons, because when people do go, these are the problems that they find. Having to explain, not being understood, their experience being denied and rejected outright, and the therapeutic space is a very vulnerable space. It's a very vulnerable space where you really open yourself up. So any rejection or non-acknowledgement of things is a very violent thing that people experience it very, very strongly in the therapeutic space. And we don't trust the services, because they are associated with people and systems that have oppressed us. And when we think of psychologists or psychiatrists, the first image that comes to mind is a white professional who is part of the system.
Right.
You're going to have a resistance to that.
Well, that is exactly one of the biggest problems that I find when I ask people. But going to mental issue, what exactly is for those people? They might have a problem, mental problem, but they're not aware. Can you kind of simplify this? What exactly is this mental health people have, and they're not aware, and they might be looking for seeking help?
Mm-hmm. Well, I believe that most people know, right? You know when you're not well, right? Because you can feel it, right? I think the question is perhaps how seriously you take it, how much do you value your life that you're going to do something for your own well-being? But it's a hard question to answer generally because you almost have to go into specific mental health problems. So maybe we can pick a couple. So maybe we can say trauma or depression, for example.
Yeah.
Okay, so if I start, depression is very popular. So
And especially when we talk about in Scandinavia, where the weather makes people to be depressed.
yes. So depression, because you're feeling very sad, you're out of sorts, you don't really feel like doing anything. It's very hard to get out of bed. It's very hard to get yourself motivated to do anything. Some people manage to keep going anyway, so it becomes almost a mechanical thing. So the numbness, when you can't feel yourself anymore, it's almost like you can't really feel your feelings. And other people, can stay in bed for days and not be able to do very much. And I always say to people, don't wait, right? Don't wait until you get to that stage. Because it never comes like that suddenly, right? It comes gradually. And we need to begin to value ourselves enough to take care of ourselves, to be well. So when I'm already beginning to feel, I've been sad for, I don't know, I've been sad for 2 weeks. Right? I'm finding no joy in anything. The food doesn't even taste good anymore. Maybe do something. And it doesn't, I also always tell people, it doesn't necessarily have to be therapy, actually. Therapy is one way of taking care of yourself and seeking healing, but there are hundreds of ways of doing that. So just talk to someone you trust, just bounce ideas. They might have ideas about things that you can do. They might have a book that might help you. They might, send you a video of a person who shares their experience and that touches you. They might take you for a walk, another way, you go for a walk in nature. That's very good as well for any mental health problem, or just even for maintenance, right? To take care of yourself. You might try meditation, but there are hundreds and millions of ways of taking care of ourselves. So basically, when we begin to feel that, just let us do something about it. Let us take care of ourselves. So for trauma, how do you know? So if you suspect, you can maybe Google it, symptoms of trauma, and you might recognize, because you will know that you have had some experiences, you know that you're feeling kind of off, what's going on. Sometimes you'll be triggered by an experience that will bring back a lot of stuff from childhood. But some of the symptoms are, if it's childhood trauma specifically, not being able to concentrate, so a lot of procrastination, difficulty in relationships, not being able, whether they are intimate relationships or friendships, difficult in staying in relationships and managing the emotional charge of relationships. If it's, you can have flashbacks to memories or suppressed memories, dreams, nightmares. Yes?
Yeah, there is a thing that people don't probably know. Maybe one of the problems, well, maybe you can help us on this, where people, let's say like the refugees, have been moving from one place. This is their home country, go to the refugee camp, the next time they're moved to another one.
And usually in very abrupt circumstances.
So do you think that is the problem, where people cause them kind of trauma or mental problem and they're not aware of that, just moving from one place to the other?